I will always be part of the royal family, and I'm here.
Prince Harry has unilaterally declared from a war zone in Ukraine that he is still part of the royal family and that traveling the world in this manner is the very thing he was born to do. Those were his exact words, delivered to ITV News at the end of his two-day visit to Kyiv. And they represent something considerably more significant than a clumsy turn of phrase in an interview. They represent a direct repudiation of the settlement that Queen Elizabeth II personally enforced at the Sandringham Summit in January 2020, the agreement that made definitively clear there would be no halfway arrangement, no part-time royal role, no continuation of royal status combined with commercial independence. The Queen, who spent 70 years understanding exactly how the institution works and what it requires, saw immediately that a half-in, half-out arrangement was unworkable. She said so. She enforced the position, the patronages were removed, the honorary military appointments were ended, the HRH prefix was retained but made functionally inactive. The working royal status was terminated in March 2020, what was supposed to be a final and unambiguous settlement. 5 years later, Harry is standing in Ukraine telling ITV News that he is still doing the very thing he was born to do, that he will always be part of the royal family, and that he is speaking truth to power as a royal family member operating on the world stage.
We need to feel empowered to be able to speak truth to power. It's really that simple. It's bad enough in today's world feeling gagged and saying that you can't say these things and can't say that, and that everything becomes political. I fundamentally disagree with that.
I mean, this is lunacy. This is lunacy on so many levels. Speaking truth to power.
This is not a minor inconsistency. This is Harry unilaterally renegotiating the terms of the Sandringham Agreement in public without consulting anyone in the institution during the week of his father's most diplomatically sensitive state visit of his reign. The timing is either oblivious or deliberate. And given the pattern of Harry's behavior over 5 years, the distinction may not matter as much as the effect. Let me address the Trump moment specifically, because it encapsulates the entire situation with uncomfortable precision. Trump was asked in the Oval Office about Harry's comments specifically about whether Harry's call for America to do more on Ukraine was appropriate ahead of the state visit. Trump's response was characteristically direct. He asked how Harry was doing, asked about his wife, said, "Please give her my regards," and then said unambiguously, "I think I'm speaking for the UK more than Prince Harry." That is Donald Trump, whose relationship with the British royal family has its own complex history, positioning himself as a more legitimate voice for British interests than the Duke of Sussex. That is a remarkable thing to have said about you, and it is, however uncomfortable the source, not an entirely inaccurate observation.
You might live with a sort of sense of grandeur and a sense of delusion that you didn't give up the job because you have these huge regrets. Doesn't make it true. Harry, you remember what happened with the former king, the Nazi king, who became the Duke of Windsor. Just because he may have walked around the world and said, "I'm still king," didn't make it true. He abdicated, he gave up his role just like you did. And it's about time you start accepting that, mate, because actually you are causing huge difficulties for your father, the king, who is starting the state visit of the USA, who is dying with terminal cancer, and you can't get it through your head.
Harry's response when asked whether his Ukraine speech might complicate his father's state visit was equally revealing. He said, with apparent genuine surprise, "Any of what?" And then when the question was clarified, he said no. He didn't think it would have any impact at all. The two interpretations of that exchange are both damaging in their own ways. Either Harry genuinely did not understand how a speech attacking American foreign policy 4 days before his father's state visit might complicate that visit, which speaks to a level of political unawareness that is difficult to credit, or he understood perfectly well and was performing surprise for the cameras. The body language that multiple observers noted, the backing away, the glance toward his handler, the abrupt end to the interview, suggests that the performance of surprise collapsed into something more like genuine alarm when the question was pressed. The royal family is not a status you can maintain selectively. It is not a flag you can plant when it is useful and lower when the obligations become inconvenient. Harry has been behaving since the Sandringham settlement as though the benefits of royal status, the titles, the deference, the access to hospitals and charities and security forums that royal adjacency provides can be retained without the obligations. He has been conducting what amount to royal tours while insisting he is a private citizen. He has been deploying his royal identity commercially while claiming not to be a working royal. He has been speaking to heads of state and addressing international policy questions while maintaining that he has stepped back from the family he represents in doing so.
Either he's stupid or he's lying. Because you know what happened? Trump was asked about that in the Oval Office.
Prince Harry today has said that he would like to see you do more to end the war in Ukraine. Do you think it's appropriate for a royal to make those comments ahead of the visit on Monday?
Prince Harry?
Yes, sir.
How's he doing? How's his wife? Please give her my regards, okay? No, I don't know. I know one thing. Prince Harry is not speaking for the UK. That's for sure. I think I'm speaking for the UK more than Prince Harry.
And I mean, that is absolutely true. I agree with Trump on that.
Speaking truth to power language is particularly striking when examined carefully. Harry is not speaking truth to power. He is power, attempting to speak truth to other power. He is a member of one of the most historically significant families in the world, holding a title granted by the British Crown, addressing world leaders from the platform that title provides. The language of speaking truth to power is the language of the dissident, the activist, the person without institutional standing, challenging those who have it. Harry has institutional standing. He has had it all his life. The fact that he describes himself as though he does not, as though he is some kind of outsider challenging the establishment rather than a product of the most establishment family in the world, tells you quite a lot about his relationship with his own identity. The comparison with the Duke of Windsor is instructive and has been raised by multiple commentators. Edward VIII abdicated. He gave up the role. He retained his title as Duke of Windsor and spent the rest of his life at the periphery of the institution, occasionally making statements that created diplomatic difficulties, occasionally performing a version of royal activity that the institution had not sanctioned. He is not remembered fondly for this period. He is remembered as someone who gave up the job and then spent decades regretting it and trying to maintain the appearance of it without accepting the finality of his own choice. The parallel with Harry is not exact, but it is not entirely unfair. Now let's talk about what the institution actually does with all of this, because the question of whether Charles will finally act is the one that everyone is asking, and that has not been clearly answered.
What Khrushchev is asking him and how his statements could be tricky for Charles, which should be obvious. Harry, the king's son, is making personal statements and demanding world leaders take action without any consultation with the monarchy. A huge problem with potential political and geopolitical ramifications that Harry is obviously unaware of. Second, when Khrushchev further clarifies the question, Harry is rather horrified and then obviously nervous when realizing that he may have made a mistake, literally backing away from ship. He then looks to his handler and ends the interview.
Tatler cover is a useful data point in this conversation. William has just appeared on the cover of Tatler Britain's most prestigious society magazine with the headline, "A Prince for Our Times." And the cover directly references and echoes the famous Queen Elizabeth II Tatler covers that defined an era, a prince for our times. The message is not subtle. William is being positioned as the legitimate heir to everything his grandmother represented, the authentic continuity of the institution, the person around whom the future of the monarchy coheres. Harry thought, at some point, that he would be a prince for our times. He genuinely believed, and this is clear from the decisions he made, that the monarchy's future belonged more to him than to William, that his accessibility and his mental health advocacy and his relationship with Meghan made him more relevant to the modern world than his stuffy, traditional, protocol-following older brother. What has happened instead is the precise inverse. William has held the course. William has served consistently, unglamorously, without fanfare, without memoir, without Netflix.
And Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack also believed that Harry was making a stunning challenge to King Charles's authority, revealing that Harry is now seeking to undo Megxit. He wrote Prince Harry threw down the gauntlet to the royal family, declaring from a war zone that he is still in effect a working royal and effectively daring King Charles to do something about it. The remarks amount to a direct repudiation of the settlement imposed at the Sandringham Summit.
And the cover of Tatler has landed on William, while Harry is in Ukraine giving AI-assisted speeches that complicate his father's state visit. That must be, for Harry, a deeply painful development to observe. Not because of the Tatler cover specifically in the grand scheme of things. A magazine cover is not enormously consequential. But because of what it represents, the world that Harry thought was going to embrace him and leave William behind has instead embraced William and moved on from Harry. The Woketopians, as they have been somewhat uncharitably described, have aligned with Catherine and William's approach to their public role, rather than with the Sussex model of grievance and commercial extraction. The progressive celebrity culture that Harry and Meghan assumed would be their natural home has turned out to have its own set of standards, and the Sussex operation has repeatedly failed to meet them. The Africa Plan is the next significant development, and it is worth addressing because the logic behind it tells you something important about how the Sussex operation thinks. Africa is apparently being mapped as the next major pseudo-royal tour, Commonwealth-level visibility according to sources, without the royal stamp. The same architecture as the Australian tour, charitable visits, veteran engagement, mental health advocacy, applied to a different geography. The logic is presumably that Africa, with its historical connection to the Commonwealth and its distance from the British and Australian media ecosystems that covered the Australian tour so critically, might produce more favorable coverage and a warmer reception, but the logic has significant holes. Harry's relationship with African conservation charities, which was once one of his most credible and genuine areas of engagement, has become complicated. The Sintali involvement and the subsequent defamation case brought by Sophie Chandoka means that one of his signature African connections is now a live legal dispute rather than a positive association. African Parks, the conservation charity in which Harry has held a senior role, has been the subject of investigations into serious allegations, including human trafficking and rape allegations against park rangers that have not been resolved. These are not minor complications.
Woman who previously gifted Prince Harry diamonds, jewels, and other gifts is again giving Harry more gifts. And he looks very happy about it. From Nancy Sidley. Well, looky here. The Kiev Security Forum that Harry is allegedly being paid to speak out and destabilise the monarchy is funded by George Soros and other oligarchs. By sending Harry on a faux diplomatic mission to Kiev, it weakens King Charles's trip to the US. Harry is a pawn. And I believe he is. There were other revolting moments in the interview, though. Prince William would have been particularly upset that Harry, as he is now almost continuously doing, decided to invoke Princess Diana again.
They are the kind of associations that make a conservation-focused African tour considerably more fraught than it might appear in a planning document. And the diminishing returns principle applies here just as it applies to every Sussex initiative. The Australian tour was supposed to demonstrate continued relevance. It produced investigations, polling collapses, and the withdrawal of the Sandringham invitation. An African tour, designed on the same template, will encounter the same pattern of problems: the controlled access, the fashion platform commissions, the attempt to look like official royal activity while claiming private citizen status in a new geography. The problems are not geographic, they are structural. And moving to a different continent does not resolve structural problems. The charm question is the one that I keep coming back to, because it is the most human element of this story, and it is the one that the political and institutional analysis tends to underweight. Harry had charm. He genuinely did. The young Harry, the one who served in Afghanistan, who built Invictus, who showed up at veterans events and connected with people in a way that was entirely natural and entirely his own, that Harry was genuinely likable in a way that required no management and no operational planning documents. People wanted to be near him because he was warm and funny and accessible and real. That Harry has, by every available account, largely disappeared. The man who gives speeches in Ukraine about speaking truth to power, who briefs the press about Sandringham invitations rather than calling his father directly, who times press interventions to coincide with his nephew's birthday and his father's state visit, who allows his children's royal titles to be used in candle marketing. That man does not project the warmth and the accessibility and the realness that the original Harry projected.
Back in the day, nearly 30 years ago, when my mother was in Angola, Halo Trust were on hands and knees clearing landmines, but the improvements and the ability to clear minefields faster is extraordinary. So the technology is very, very impressive. To all the donors and funders out there, please continue to support Halo Trust so that we can get more drones and clear these spaces so they can be safe for Ukrainians to enjoy.
But actually, the real footage wasn't so good for Harry because the Sun revealed he'd actually been mocked by one of the staff members about his thinning head of hair.
The charm has curdled into something else. Whether that curdling is the result of the relationship with Meghan or of the trauma processing that has not gone as well as his therapy speeches suggest, or of the specific corrosive effect of 5 years of commercial operation and grievance narrative, or all three, is unknowable from the outside. What is observable is the result. The friendship business insight is the right way to frame what has gone wrong. Pop stars are not in the music business. Actors are not in the acting business. Everyone in public life is in the friendship business, in the business of making audiences feel connected to them, invested in them, rooting for them. Harry used to do this effortlessly. Now he does not. And no amount of speaking truth to power or AI-written Ukraine speeches or candles named after his children changes the fundamental reality that the audience has stopped finding him likable. And likability is the one thing that cannot be manufactured. The Sandringham visit context adds an important dimension here. Multiple sources have described the proposed visit in terms that undercut the stated motivation. The suggestion that Harry wants to see his father, that he wants his children to know their grandfather, is presented as the sincere motivation. The alternative reading, that a visit to Sandringham, photographed and publicized and timed to coincide with Charles's presence there, provides a reputational boost and a royal adjacency that has commercial value, is the one that palace sources appear to find more credible. Using your cancer-stricken father as a source of publicity is not a warm or sympathetic action. And the people around Charles have apparently reached the conclusion that this is what is actually happening, which is the most significant reason for the withdrawal of the invitation.
Cutting across the crown at the worst possible hour. Was it wise? No, but Harry isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. He and Meghan will not be in Washington, of course, nor should they be, but their absence travels with the delegation. Archie is 6. Lilibet turns 5 this June. They are growing up in Montecito with no memory of their grandfather, and every month that passes is a month lost. That those two children may reach double figures without ever sitting in his kitchen at Highgrove or walking the gardens with him or hearing him murmur to the plants as he does is a private grief no amount of diplomatic choreography can touch.
Harry will always be part of the royal family in the biological and genealogical sense. No one disputes that. He is Charles's son, he is William's brother, his children are the grandchildren of a king. These facts are immutable. But being part of the royal family in the sense that he appeared to mean as a working representative of the institution, doing what he was born to do in an official capacity on the world stage, that is not a status he retains. The Queen made that clear. The Sandringham Agreement formalized it, and Charles's withdrawal of the Sandringham invitation is the latest assertion of the same fundamental point. The architecture of that agreement, personally enforced by a woman who had 7 decades of understanding of what the institution requires, cannot be unilaterally renegotiated by one of the parties to it, because that party has changed his mind or found the terms inconvenient. Harry saying he is still doing the very thing he was born to do does not make it so. Edward VIII saying he was still the king did not make it so either. The role was given up. The decision was made. And The consequences of that decision, the absence from the Tatler cover, the withdrawal of the Sandringham invitation, the 30% approval rating, the diminishing commercial returns, the stripped patronages and honorary titles are the architecture of a reality that Harry's words in Ukraine cannot change.
Rob, that interview was a disgrace. It was a declaration of war. And the fact that it was on Woke ITV just allows Harry to utter whatever nonsense he wants, never pushes back, total propaganda, makes it even more inexcusable. I mean, why did Chris Shipp, who claims to be a journalist, Rob, not say to him, well, no, you're not a working royal anymore, Harry. What about the Sandringham agreement? I mean, do we just live in a world where Harry can say whatever he wants in favoured media without even a hint of pushback?
He is in Kyiv, Charles is in Washington, William is on the cover of Tatler, and the institution that Harry was born to and chose to leave is demonstrating with every passing week that it can manage without him far more comfortably than he can manage without it. Let me go deeper on the specific claim Harry made that he will always be part of the royal family, because it deserves more careful examination than it typically receives in commentary that focuses on the emotional or political dimensions. The statement has two possible interpretations, and Harry appears to be deliberately exploiting the ambiguity between them. The first interpretation is biographical and familial. Harry is Charles's son. He shares blood and lineage with the royal family, and in that sense, regardless of any institutional arrangements, he will always have a connection to that family. This interpretation is true and uncontroversial. Nobody disputes it. The second interpretation is institutional and functional. Harry is asserting that he retains the status and the role of a working member of the royal family, that his activities in Ukraine constitute official royal work, that he is doing what he was born to do in a capacity that carries the weight and the legitimacy of the crown. This interpretation is false, and it was made explicitly false by the Sandringham Agreement in 2020. By deploying a statement that is true in the first sense, while implying the second, Harry achieves something specific and calculated. He cannot be immediately contradicted on the factual level he is, biologically, always going to be part of the royal family. But the impression he creates is of ongoing official royal activity, of a man doing his duty, of a royal representative operating on the world stage. The impression is false. The statement is technically true.
Heartbreaking. You start being angry at first, and then it breaks your heart. It feels like he hates his family, and he's going to do everything in his power to destroy them. He's not the sharpest guy in the world, but he's sharp enough to know that what he's doing is wrong, and he is surrounding himself with people who are going to carry his water, who are going to carry his... This wasn't a trained reporter who interviewed Harry. This was somebody that was selected very carefully. They went on the trip with Harry. And what did make me giggle a little bit is Harry almost couldn't handle this interview. And this is a very friendly interview. Harry got a little bit surly and frustrated in this interview. So goodness knows how he would handle a real reporter. It's just heartbreaking here.
This is, in its small way, characteristic of how the Sussex communications operation works. Tom Sykes identified the specific legal and constitutional significance of the statement accurately. The Sandringham Agreement was not just a private family arrangement. It was a formal institutional settlement. The Queen personally enforced its terms. Harry and Meghan undertook their final engagement as working royals in March 2020, and that was supposed to be the definitive end of their working royal status. Harry's claim, 5 years later, that this is still the very thing he was born to do, and that he will always be a part of the royal family in the functional sense he implies, is a direct repudiation of that settlement and of the authority of the woman who enforced it. The late Queen deserves to have her decisions respected. She is not here to enforce them further. But her understanding of what the institution requires and her judgment that a half-in, half-out arrangement was unworkable remains as valid now as it was in January 2020. Harry saying otherwise does not make it otherwise. And Charles, or eventually William, will have to assert the finality of that settlement in formal institutional terms. Now let me also address the broader media environment that enabled the Ukraine interview and the ITV platform it was given. because it matters for understanding how the Sussex communications machine operates. Chris Shipp, the ITV royal editor who conducted the interview, was described in commentary as a propagandist rather than a journalist. Whether that characterization is fair is a question of perspective.
Some interesting news in Naughty But Nice, your Substack, Rob, about exactly what's going on in America this week and how difficult this is going to be for Harry and Meghan, given they have not been included in even the New York part of the visit, far away from Washington, D.C. Yet other celebrities like Anna Wintour and Martha Stewart have been. And you write, while King Charles III and Queen Camilla arrive in the United States, their schedule is already locked. Diplomacy in the capital, followed by a polished Manhattan reception for the King's Trust in New York City, where Anna Wintour and Martha Stewart are expected to greet the royal couple. Noticeably missing Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the grandchildren.
What is observable is that the interview was conducted in terms that were broadly sympathetic to Harry's framing. The questions were not adversarial. The follow-up on the diplomatic disruption question, when it finally came, was not pressed when Harry expressed faux surprise at its implications. And the overall framing of Harry's key visit as serious, purposeful, humanitarian was largely unchallenged. This is the access journalism dynamic operating in a specific form. ITV wanted the Harry interview. Harry's team provided it on terms that suited them. A format, a location, an interviewer disposition that they assessed would produce usable content. The interview Harry gave is not the interview he would have given to a journalist who pressed him on the diplomatic timing, on the AI speech allegations, on the Sandringham withdrawal, on the fashion platform commissions during the Australian tour. That interview does not exist because Harry does not give it to people who would ask those questions. He gives it to people who will ask the questions he can answer in the way he wants to answer them. This is why the distinction between access journalism and independent reporting matters so much in the Sussex context. The Sussex narrative that has been sustained in the mainstream media is a narrative that exists because specific journalists have been given specific access on specific terms. Take away that access, and the narrative has no mechanism for propagation in those outlets. The independent reporting, the financial investigations, the fashion platform analysis, the polling documentation, the legal case reporting has not been produced by people with Sussex access.
It would be used by the Sussexes to remind everybody, look, we told you, we're still royals. And so that is what the palace has really, begrudgingly, they didn't want to admit this. It's hard to admit the truth when the truth is so awful about your son, about a family member. They always gave him the benefit of the doubt. And now they've realized that any meeting in America, any meeting in New York would not be about Harry desperate to see his dad, would not be about Harry wanting to introduce his children to their grandfather. They've not seen each other for 4 years. No, that's an excuse. That's not the reason. The reason is Harry wants to remind the world, and particularly business people who are doing deals, that he is still part of this family. Look,
it has been produced by people who looked at the documented evidence and reported what they found. And what they found has consistently, and over 5 years, been considerably less flattering to Harry and Meghan than the access journalism product. Trump's response to the Harry question is worth a final moment of attention because it captures something important about the global picture of the Sussex brand. When the sitting president of the United States is asked about Prince Harry's comments and responds by asking how he is doing and sending his regards to his wife, that is a very specific register of dismissal. It is not hostility. It is not engagement. It is the kind of benign deflection you deploy when you do not consider the person being asked about sufficiently significant to merit a serious response. Trump did not attack Harry. He did not dismiss him angrily. He essentially shrugged. And the shrug from the most powerful person in the world says more about Harry's current global standing than any amount of polling data or approval ratings. The institution Harry left is managing its affairs. Charles is in Washington. William is on the cover of Tatler. Catherine is working and being photographed with children who respond to her warmth naturally rather than flinching away.
less impact it will have. A friend of mine pointed out they drop the chandelier once in Phantom of the Opera because if you drop it again, it doesn't work. It only is spectacular the first time you do it. If you keep repeating the same trick, every magician knows that. If you keep trying to recreate that old magic, the magic gets less and less and less. So I hope they do go to Africa. I hope they go to Canada. I hope they go all over, because every single stop, more will be revealed about them, about the response, and about they are a one-trick pony. This is all that they can do. They have no substance, nothing to back it up.
The polls show consistent trust and affection for the working royals, even during a period of significant institutional challenge. The monarchy, which Harry and Meghan's departure and its aftermath were supposed to have destabilized, has not been destabilized. It has been strengthened, paradoxically, by the contrast between how the working royals conduct themselves and how the non-working royals have chosen to operate. And Harry is in Ukraine giving speeches that may have been written by an AI, claiming to still be a working royal, expressing surprise that his interventions might complicate his father's state visit, and looking toward his handler when the follow-up question reveals that the surprise was not entirely genuine. He is at 30% in the UK polls. Meghan is at 20%. The Sandringham invitation has been withdrawn. The Africa tour is being planned on the assumption that the same template that failed in Australia will somehow work differently in a different continent. The Phantom of the Opera metaphor is the right one. You drop the chandelier once, the second time it does not land with the same effect. The third time, the audience is checking their phones. Every Sussex tour is another chandelier. Every statement from Ukraine is another chandelier. And the ceiling of Sussex relevance is running out of chandeliers to drop. The institution endures. The agreement the Queen enforced endures.
It just hasn't worked out that way. William has held the course and actually has received the backing, even from the Woketopians like Jacinda Ardern.
I think you're absolutely right there. You do make me laugh, my friend. Nobody puts things quite like you do. You're absolutely right. Harry could have had it all. He really could have. William could have been that stuffy king doing all the boring stuff, and Harry could have been the people's prince. And I think that he must be scratching that head, wondering how it all went wrong, and the difference between him and his mom.
The distinction between being a member of the royal family by blood and being a working royal by function endures. And Harry's declaration from Kyiv that he is still doing the very thing he was born to do does not change any of those facts. It just tells you quite a lot about where he is emotionally and psychologically 5 years after the decision that defined his adult life. He was born to serve the institution. He left the institution. He has not found a replacement for the purpose the institution provided. And the desperate attempt to reclaim that purpose through Ukraine speeches and fake royal tours and the claim that this is the very thing he was born to do is perhaps the most honest and most painful thing about all of that. Not a villain, not a monster, just a man who gave something up that he needed and has not, in 5 years, found anything that adequately replaces it. The institution will not take him back on the terms he wants. The Queen said so. Charles has now asserted it again through the Sandringham withdrawal. William will assert it more formally and more permanently when the time comes. The terms that Harry wants, the royal status and the commercial freedom simultaneously, the institutional legitimacy and the absence of institutional obligation, those terms were never available. The Queen made that clear in January 2020, and nothing that has happened since has changed that fundamental fact.